The investigation began when Patricia Wells died wearing dog tags from a soldier who had been declared missing in Vietnam 50 years ago. But what military investigators discovered was even more shocking. Patricia had spent her entire career following in the footsteps of the woman whose tags she wore, completing missions that were connected to a promise made before she was born. Which city in the world are you watching this video from today? Please subscribe and support us for more stories. Master Sergeant Patricia Wells was found dead in her quarters at Fort Bragg on a quiet Sunday morning in March 20. At 51 years old, she had served with distinction for 30 years, earning commendations for exceptional service in Iraq, Afghanistan, and classified operations around the world. Her death appeared to be from natural causes, possibly a heart attack brought on by the stress of recent combat deployments and the demanding pace of military life. The routine processing of Patricia's personal effects should have been straightforward, but it quickly became one of the most puzzling investigations in military history. Among her possessions were the dog tags she had worn every day for 3 decades, tags that every soldier who knew her assumed were standard issue from her initial enlistment. The tags were worn smooth from years of handling, their metal surface polished by constant contact with her skin. When military personnel processing Patricia's effects scanned the identification numbers on her dog tags into the military database, they expected to find her standard service record. Instead, the system returned information that seemed impossible. The tags belonged to Private First Class Jennifer Hayes, a soldier who had been declared missing in action during the Vietnam War in 1971, 2 years before Patricia Wells was even born. The initial assumption was that there had been some administrative error, perhaps confusion between similar identification numbers or a database malfunction that had corrupted service records. But verification through multiple military record systems confirmed the impossible reality. Patricia Wells had spent her entire military career wearing the identification tags of a woman who had disappeared in Southeast Asia decades before Patricia's birth. Master Sergeant Patricia Wells had enlisted in the Army in 1994 when she was 21 years old. Her enlistment record showed a normal background check, standard physical examination, and routine processing through basic training at Fort Moore. There was nothing in her file that suggested any connection to Vietnam War veterans or any reason she would have access to dog tags from that era. Patricia's service record was exemplary and unremarkable in equal measure. She had served as a logistics specialist, managing supply chains and equipment distribution for various units deployed around the world. Her assignments had taken her to combat zones in multiple countries, but her role was typically behind the scenes, ensuring that frontline units received the equipment and supplies necessary for their missions. What made Patricia memorable to her colleagues was not her professional achievements, which were solid but not exceptional, but rather her obsessive care for military equipment and her unusual interest in the history of units she served with. She was known for spending hours researching the backgrounds of her assignments, learning about previous deployments, and understanding the historical context of her unit's missions. Patricia's colleagues often commented on her habit of touching her dog tags when she was deep in thought or facing difficult decisions. She would hold the tags between her thumb and forefinger, running her fingers over the worn metal surface as if drawing strength or guidance from the familiar weight. When asked about the habit, she would simply say that the tags reminded her of why she served. The investigation into Patricia's possession of Jennifer Hayes's dog tags began with attempts to trace how she might have acquired them. Military investigators examined her family background, her associates, and her activities outside of military service, looking for any connection that might explain her possession of another soldier's identification. Patricia's family background revealed no obvious connections to Vietnam War veterans. Her parents had been civilians during the Vietnam era, her father working in construction and her mother as a school teacher. Neither had military service, and family interviews revealed no knowledge of any relatives who had served in Vietnam or who might have possessed military memorabilia from that period. The search of Patricia's quarters revealed additional puzzles that deepened the mystery rather than providing explanations. Hidden among her personal belongings were detailed maps of regions in Vietnam and Cambodia, marked with locations that corresponded to classified military operations from the early Patricia had no official reason to possess such information, and the level of detail suggested access to intelligence sources that should have been far beyond her clearance level. More disturbing were the notebooks that Patricia had kept throughout her military career, filled with handwritten research about missing personnel from the Vietnam War. The notebooks contained hundreds of pages of information about soldiers who had been declared missing in action, their last known locations, and theories about what might have happened to them. The research was meticulous and appeared to have consumed enormous amounts of Patricia's personal time over many years. The most significant discovery was a letter hidden in Patricia's personal safe, written in handwriting that military experts confirmed belonged to Jennifer Hayes. The letter was dated February 1971, just weeks before Jennifer's disappearance, and was addressed to someone identified only as Little Star. The letter spoke of promises to find missing soldiers and bring them home, obligations that would need to be fulfilled by someone else if Jennifer didn't survive her deployment. Military historians were consulted to provide context for Jennifer Hayes' service and disappearance. Private First Class Jennifer Hayes had been assigned to a classified reconnaissance unit operating in Cambodia during 1971, conducting intelligence-gathering missions in areas where American military presence was not officially acknowledged. Her unit had been tasked with locating and recovering American personnel who had been captured or gone missing during earlier operations. Jennifer's disappearance occurred during a mission to investigate reports of American prisoners being held at a facility near the Cambodian-Vietnamese border. Her team had been inserted by helicopter, but radio contact was lost within hours of their arrival. Search and rescue operations were conducted, but no trace of Jennifer or her team members was ever found. She was officially declared missing in action, and her case remained open but inactive for over 50 years. The connection between Jennifer Hayes' missing status and Patricia Wells' career became apparent when investigators mapped Patricia's deployment history against the locations where Jennifer had served. Patricia's assignments had consistently taken her to regions where American personnel remained missing from previous conflicts, and her logistics work had often involved supporting search and recovery operations for missing soldiers. Further investigation revealed that Patricia had used her position in military logistics to facilitate unofficial searches for missing personnel, redirecting resources and equipment to support operations that were not part of her official duties. She had developed relationships with local contacts in multiple countries, gathering information about the locations of crash sites, burial grounds, and other evidence related to missing American soldiers. Patricia's activities had extended far beyond her official responsibilities, essentially conducting a parallel career as an unofficial investigator of missing personnel cases. She had used her military clearances and position to access classified information about historical operations, piece together intelligence about missing soldiers, and organize recovery efforts that operated outside normal military channels. The notebooks that Patricia had maintained revealed the scope of her unofficial activities. Over 30 years, she had identified the remains of over 40 missing soldiers, providing information that led to official recovery operations and the return of remains to families who had waited decades for closure. Her work had been instrumental in resolving cases that military officials had considered unsolvable. What was most remarkable about Patricia's activities was that she had never sought recognition or credit for her contributions to missing personnel recovery. The families who received remains of their loved ones through information Patricia provided were never told of her involvement. Military officials who used her intelligence to conduct recovery operations were often unaware of the source of their information. Patricia's motivation for dedicating her life to finding missing soldiers became clearer when investigators discovered additional letters hidden throughout her possessions. These letters, all written in Jennifer Hayes' handwriting, revealed that Jennifer had made a promise to locate and recover missing American personnel, viewing this mission as her primary responsibility rather than any specific military assignment. The letters indicated that Jennifer Hayes had been part of an unofficial network of soldiers who were dedicated to ensuring that no American personnel were left behind in Southeast Asia. This network operated parallel to official military operations, using their positions and resources to conduct searches and recovery operations that were not sanctioned by higher command, but were considered morally essential by the soldiers involved. Jennifer's final letter, dated the day before her disappearance, contained specific instructions for continuing her mission if she didn't return from her deployment. The letter provided details about ongoing investigations, contacts who could provide assistance, and locations where missing personnel might be found. Most importantly, it included a promise that someone would continue the work if Jennifer was unable to complete it herself. The investigation concluded that Patricia Wells had somehow gained access to Jennifer Hayes's letters and had chosen to fulfill the promise that Jennifer had made before her disappearance. Patricia had spent 30 years completing missions that Jennifer had begun, using Jennifer's research and contacts to continue the search for missing soldiers that Jennifer had started in that. How Patricia had obtained Jennifer's letters and dog tags remained a mystery that investigators were never able to solve completely. The most likely explanation was that Patricia had discovered the items among military equipment or personal effects that had been stored and forgotten for decades, possibly in a depot or warehouse where unclaimed materials were kept. Patricia's decision to wear Jennifer's dog tags and continue her mission represented a commitment that went far beyond normal military duty. She had essentially adopted Jennifer's identity and purpose, viewing herself as an extension of the soldier who had disappeared 50 years earlier. The psychological and emotional commitment required for such dedication was extraordinary and suggested a personal connection to the mission that transcended professional obligations. The impact of Patricia's work became apparent when military investigators attempted to document her contributions to missing personnel recovery. Her unofficial activities had led to the recovery of remains from dozens of soldiers, the resolution of cases that had been considered hopeless, and the provision of closure to families who had waited decades for information about their missing loved ones. Patricia's methods had been unconventional and sometimes violated military protocols, but her results were undeniable. She had succeeded in accomplishing objectives that official military operations had been unable to achieve, using resources and approaches that were not available through normal channels. Her dedication and persistence had made her one of the most effective personnel recovery specialists in military history, despite never holding an official position in that field. The military's response to Patricia's unauthorized activities was complicated by the positive results she had achieved. While her methods had violated regulations and procedures, her contributions to missing personnel recovery were significant and valuable. Military leaders struggled to balance recognition of her achievements against the need to maintain discipline and proper authorization for military operations. The decision was made to posthumously recognize Patricia's contributions, while also implementing new procedures to prevent unauthorized personnel recovery operations in the future. Patricia received commendations for her service, though the specific details of her missing personnel recovery work remained classified to protect ongoing operations and the methods she had developed. Patricia's personal effects, including Jennifer Hayes's dog tags and letters, were transferred to military historians for preservation and study. The materials provided valuable insights into Vietnam War operations and the informal networks that had developed among soldiers concerned about missing personnel. The documentation would be used to support future recovery operations and historical research. The families of soldiers whose remains were recovered through Patricia's efforts were quietly informed of her contributions, though many details remained classified. The notification process revealed that Patricia had been responsible for providing closure to dozens of families, returning soldiers home decades after their disappearance, and allowing proper burial and mourning that had been impossible while their status remained unknown. Jennifer Hayes's status was officially changed from missing in action to killed in action, based on evidence that Patricia had discovered during her decades of investigation. Jennifer's remains were never recovered, but sufficient evidence was found to conclude that she had been killed during her final mission in Cambodia. Her family was notified and provided with the closure they had sought for over 50 years. The story of Patricia Wells and Jennifer Hayes became a classified case study within military personnel recovery programs, illustrating both the dedication of individual soldiers to the welfare of their comrades and the challenges of conducting recovery operations across multiple decades. The case influenced policies regarding missing personnel and the resources dedicated to recovery operations. Patricia's quarters were converted into a memorial for missing personnel, though the specific details of her work remained known only to military officials with appropriate clearances. The memorial served as a reminder of the commitment that some soldiers make to ensure that their comrades are never forgotten, regardless of how much time passes or how difficult the search becomes. The investigation into Patricia's activities revealed that she had maintained contact with veterans, family members, and researchers around the world who were interested in missing personnel recovery. Her network of contacts had provided information and support for recovery operations, creating an informal but effective intelligence gathering system that operated parallel to official military channels. Patricia's research methods and investigative techniques were studied by military intelligence specialists who were impressed by her ability to gather information and piece together complex historical puzzles. Her approach to missing personnel cases had been systematic and thorough, often uncovering evidence that official investigations had missed or been unable to access. The psychological evaluation of Patricia's commitment to Jennifer's mission revealed the depth of her identification with the missing soldier and the promise she had made. Patricia had essentially restructured her entire life around fulfilling obligations that belonged to someone else, demonstrating a level of selflessness and dedication that was extraordinary even by military standards. Patricia Wells had worn Jennifer Hayes's dog tags for 30 years, but in the process, she had become something more than either woman had been individually. She had combined Jennifer's mission with her own capabilities, creating a legacy of service that honored both soldiers while accomplishing objectives that neither could have achieved alone. The promise that Jennifer Hayes had made in 1971 was finally fulfilled in 2024, not by Jennifer herself, but by a soldier who had chosen to carry that burden for 30 years. Patricia Wells had dedicated her life to ensuring that no soldier was left behind, continuing work that had begun before she was born, and completing missions that were more important than her own recognition or career advancement. Some promises transcend the people who make them, becoming obligations that pass from one generation to another until they are finally fulfilled. Patricia Wells learned that wearing someone else's dog tags was more than carrying their identity. It was accepting responsibility for their unfinished business and ensuring that their commitments would be honored regardless of how much time passed or how much personal sacrifice was required. The tags that weren't hers had become more truly hers than any official identification could ever be, because she had earned the right to wear them through 30 years of service to a cause that was larger than any individual soldier. Patricia Wells had found her purpose in fulfilling someone else's promise, and in doing so, she had created a legacy that honored every soldier who had ever gone missing in service to their country.